Hollywood has always loved perfection, a flawless image, a practiced smile, a life that appears untouched by sorrow. Few embodied this illusion more convincingly than Jennifer Aniston. For decades, the world saw her as the woman with the effortless glow, the warm laugh, the charm that seemed both natural and impossible. On magazine covers and talk shows, she appeared serene, steady, unbroken. But behind the perfect Hollywood smile lived a truth far quieter, a truth woven from shadows the cameras never captured. In interviews, she spoke softly about resilience. The public interpreted it as strength, but those words carried weight the world didn't understand. Her fortune, estimated today at over $300 million, created a picture of success so complete that pain seemed incompatible with her story. But money can light a home. It cannot soften its silence. Her private struggles, shaped by years of media pressure, personal heartbreak, and unspoken grief, sat quietly behind the glow of her public life. The world watched her rise, watched her fame expand, watched her love life become a global conversation, yet rarely paused to imagine what she endured when the lights dimmed and the rooms grew still. Inside her home, during some of her most difficult years, the evenings stretched longer than the days. The soft lamplight fell across empty hallways. Old photographs rested on shelves like unanswered questions. And through it all, she carried the same smile, gentle, constant, comforting, a shield polished by a lifetime of expectation. But what pain lived behind that smile? What loneliness hid inside the woman the world believed had everything? And how does someone so adored learn to survive in silence? How can a face so radiant conceal a storm no one ever chose to see? Before she became one of Hollywood's most recognizable faces, Jennifer Aniston was a young girl shaped by contrasts, raised between the warmth of creativity and the quiet ache of a fractured home. Born in Los Angeles in 1969, she grew up watching her parents, both actors, navigate the unpredictability of the entertainment world. But it was the collapse of their marriage when she was 9 that left the deepest impression, a silence that settled into her childhood like an unwelcome guest. She learned early how to smile through the things that hurt. In high school, she discovered the stage, a place where the noise of her inner world softened. Acting wasn't an escape, it was a language, a way to express emotions she had never been taught to name. After graduation, she took small roles, endured rejection, worked as a waitress. She walked through New York's winter streets to auditions, clutching hope like a fragile ember. Nothing came easily, but something inside her refused to let go. Then in 1994, everything changed. Friends arrived not as an opportunity, but as a phenomenon. And Jennifer, with her effortless timing and luminous presence, became its heart. Rachel Green wasn't just a character. She was a cultural shift. The haircut, the lines, the laughter, they spread across continents with astonishing speed. Overnight, Jennifer wasn't simply an actress. She was a symbol of a generation learning to love, lose, and grow in real time. Awards followed, roles expanded. Her face became synonymous with warmth, relatability, a natural elegance Hollywood rarely witnessed. On red carpets, she moved with unstudied grace. In interviews, she spoke with that familiar softness, half humor, half vulnerability. People saw her as unshakable, steady, the embodiment of charm. But the truth of fame is that it magnifies everything. The triumphs, the cracks, the loneliness. And for Jennifer, the glow of success casts shadows just as long. Because behind the applause, another story, quieter, more fragile, had already begun to form. 3. Success can illuminate a life, but it can also cast shadows no audience ever sees. As Jennifer Aniston rose to global fame, the world imagined she lived in an orbit of constant laughter. Friendships like the ones she portrayed, effortless joy, a steady heart untouched by despair. But privately she moved through years shaped by fractures, both old and new, carrying a solitude that fame only intensified. Her parents' divorce had carved something deep in her, a quiet fear of instability, a longing for emotional safety she rarely spoke about. And as the media learned to feed on her personal life, that longing hardened into something sharper, the understanding that her vulnerability had become public currency. Every relationship she entered became a national headline. Every heartbreak turned into a spectacle. Strangers analyzed her expression, her weight, her posture, her clothes, searching for hints of sadness, as if her pain were an entertainment form. In her home, the silence grew heavier. Evenings settled slowly across the rooms. Soft lamps flickered against walls lined with photographs from earlier years, reminders of a simpler time before the world demanded pieces of her heart. Friends would later say she cherished quiet moments, sipping tea alone in her kitchen, walking barefoot across her garden at dusk, letting the soft hum of the city drift through half-open windows. These were the small rituals that kept her grounded, invisible to the outside world. But they were also rituals born of necessity, ways to soothe a spirit stretched thin between public expectation and private longing. Her marriage to Brad Pitt, once idealized as the pinnacle of Hollywood romance, became another chapter the world consumed endlessly. When it ended, the media painted her as the woman left behind, a label that followed her like a shadow. She smiled through interviews, posed gracefully at premieres, continued to work with quiet professionalism. But behind those smiles lay a fatigue the cameras could not mask forever. And as whispers about her personal life multiplied, questions about children, happiness, fulfillment, Jennifer found herself living in a paradox, adored by millions, yet increasingly alone with the ache of being misunderstood. It was within this quiet solitude, this space between image and reality, that the next chapter of her hidden struggle slowly began to take shape. There comes a moment in every life when the weight of silence grows too heavy to carry. For Jennifer Aniston, that moment didn't arrive in public. It arrived quietly, in the stillness of her home, long before the media ever detected a shift in her smile. The world often assumed she was invincible, a woman who had mastered heartbreak and expectation with flawless grace. But in truth, the version of Jennifer seen in magazines existed only in fragments. The rest of her was human, tender, hopeful, and deeply wounded by years of scrutiny she never invited. In the late 2000s, the pressure reached a point of collapse. Every interview seemed to circle the same questions, cutting into the same wounds: marriage, motherhood, rumors, comparisons. Headlines dissected her private decisions as if they were national concerns. She was asked repeatedly why she didn't have children, as though womanhood were incomplete without them. The world projected its expectations onto her until her silence, once a shield, became a prison. Inside her home, she often sat by the window in the evenings, watching the Los Angeles skyline lose its light. The glow of the city blurred softly through the glass, while the rooms around her felt suspended in a quiet that hummed with exhaustion. A stack of unfinished scripts lay on the coffee table. Her phone screen lit up with notifications she didn't answer. Friends said she seemed thoughtful, distant, moving through her days with a calmness that felt almost too careful. The breaking point wasn't explosive, it wasn't dramatic. It was a slow unraveling, the kind that comes from years of holding one's breath. Jennifer didn't scream or lash out. She retreated inward, reflecting on the life she had built and the parts of herself she had lost along the way. She confronted truths she had buried beneath professionalism and politeness: the grief of failed relationships, the ache of public judgment, the fatigue of having her worth measured by narratives she didn't write. And when she finally spoke, through select interviews, essays, and her own measured voice, she revealed something the world had never fully understood: that her smile had been armor, that her silence had been survival, and that the pain behind her perfect image had been real all along. Why must a woman break before she is finally allowed to be seen? 5. In the years that followed her quiet unraveling, Jennifer Aniston began piecing her life back together with a steadiness the world had rarely witnessed. Her fortune, estimated at over $300 million, was often cited as evidence of an enviable life. But money had never been the balm people imagined. It offered comfort, yes, but not clarity; stability, but not peace. And so her true rebuilding happened far away from bank accounts and contracts. in the quiet, unseen corners of her private world. She returned to work with renewed intention, not to prove anything, not to reclaim lost status, but to rediscover the part of herself that had once found freedom in expression. Projects like The Morning Show, where she stepped into a role layered with vulnerability and rage, mirrored pieces of her own journey. Audiences saw the performance. Fewer saw the catharsis beneath it. Acting became not escape, but confrontation, a way of finally giving voice to emotions she had spent years masking behind composure. Inside her home, the atmosphere shifted. The once heavy silence softened. Sunlight fell differently across the rooms, warmer, more forgiving. She filled her days with rituals of care, meditation, long walks, grounding habits that allowed her to reclaim time as something she owned, not something demanded of her. Friends described her as more open, more present, more willing to share the pieces of her life she once fiercely protected. Slowly, she rewrote her relationship with solitude. It was no longer a reminder of heartbreak, but a space where she found herself again. Her narrative around motherhood, once twisted into headlines and weaponized by tabloids, was reclaimed on her own terms. In 2022, she revealed the deeply personal truth she had carried for years: her journey with fertility, the treatments she endured in silence, the grief she protected from the world. It was a revelation not of weakness, but of strength, a declaration that her worth had never been tied to the expectations imposed upon her. The world listened differently this time, not with gossip, not with assumptions, but with a softness that finally matched the tenderness of her truth. Her fortune, her fame, her career, these were merely parts of her legacy. The real inheritance she leaves behind is something quieter: the courage to live an authentic life in a world that constantly demands performance. She became a symbol not of perfection, but of resilience, proof that a woman can weather scrutiny, heartbreak, and years of public distortion and still emerge with her dignity intact. And yet, beneath the triumph, the mystery of her interior life remains. Jennifer never reveals more than she chooses. Her home, though open to warmth, still holds rooms of silence where memories rest untouched. Her smile today is not a mask, but a marker of survival, shaped by pain, strengthened by experience, softened by acceptance. Her legacy is not the flawless image she once projected. It is the woman behind it, fiercely human, beautifully imperfect, and finally, profoundly seen. And in the quiet she reclaimed, her story continues, steady, gentle, and entirely her own. In the softened light of recent years, Jennifer Aniston's story has taken on a different shape. Not the glossy outline Hollywood once insisted on, but the more fragile, more complex silhouette of a woman who learned to live with her shadows instead of hiding from them. Her smile, once interpreted as effortless perfection, now carries a depth that only those who have endured quiet battles can understand. It is no longer a mask. It is a testament. Her journey reminds the world that the brightest faces often come from the darkest rooms, that grace can coexist with grief, and that strength is sometimes nothing more than choosing to continue when the world misunderstands you. Jennifer did not crumble under the narratives written about her. She outlived them. She reclaimed what they tried to define. She reintroduced herself, not through spectacle, but through truth spoken on her own terms. So what remains of the pain behind the perfect Hollywood smile? Not a wound, but a wisdom. Not a tragedy, but a transformation. Not an ending, but a quiet, enduring beginning. Because true legacy is never built from the applause we receive, but from the honesty we leave behind. And as her story settles into the gentle hush of its later chapters, one truth echoes through the silence she once carried alone. Le silence ne tue pas la mémoire. Il la purifie. Silence does not kill memory. It purifies it. In that purified silence, Jennifer Aniston finally stands as she always was. Not an illusion of perfection, but a woman who learned to rise softly, steadily, in her own light.